Of Blood and Steel, written by Seymour Zainali, narrated by James Lawrence. Chapter 13. The Mystic Forest. The water was still rushing around her when Arda grasped to draw in some air. She took a deep breath before she looked around to find Balak and the child. She saw them on the shore to her left. She forced herself toward them. "Balak!" Arda screamed as she extended her arm to him. Balak grabbed her arm and lifted her out of the water. "Thank you, Her words were cut off as Balak pushed her back under the water. She struggled for a few seconds before he lifted her so she could breathe.
"Give me one fucking reason why I shouldn't do the assassin a favor and kill you myself."
You wouldn't be here if I didn't intervene," she gasped.
"You pushed me to my death," he roared.
"I was trying to save you, you dumb brute." He pushed her back under the water, this time for a little longer. Arda tried to feel the surface and grabbed a small rock. As soon as Balak lifted her back up again, she hit him across the face with all the force she could muster, sending him far enough away and allowing her to climb out of the stream. They both lay on the ground, trying to gather their strength, before Balak broke the silence.
"How do I know you aren't using me to help you? Am I even here of my own volition?"
"You wish to leave? Then go."
"Who is he, anyway?"
Balak questioned Arda as he got up and extended his hand to her. "I don't know. I just saw him looking for me in the hollow," she replied as she grabbed Balak's hand.
"Looking for you? What could he want with you?"
"I don't know."
"You should have told me."
"If I did, you would never have agreed."
"There is more that you are not telling me. Who are you really, Arda? What's going on? Why would the... Balak looked at the child and went silent. "So the troops, the child, did you steal her?"
"What? No, I wouldn't even..."
"Then whose is she?"
Arda lowered her head. "The king's. She's the king's child, and has the rightful claim to the throne."
"Is she yours?"
Arda looked at the ground.
"Arda, is the child yours?"
She gently lifted her head, tears rushing through her eyes. The answer Balak was seeking was written all over her face. "Don't make me say it," she begged. For a split second, Balak's arms lifted to give Arda a comforting hug, but his anger got the better of him. He passed her by and coldly left her to weep alone. Arda took the child from the sling and sobbed while she dried and changed her.
"I'll honor my word," he said. "We'll still travel to the Iron Gates, and I will protect you and the child. But once we're there, our arrangement is over."
Arda continued sobbing.
"And one more thing. There is no more us anymore. There is just you and I."
"So where are we now?" Arda asked as she washed the tears from her face. Balak looked around, unable to pinpoint their exact location. He hesitantly spoke.
"The Mystic Forest."
They followed the path for a while in silence, taking in their surroundings. Suddenly, Balak and Arda paused with their mouths agape. Beams of sunlight shone through the leaves and formed all different colors. "It's gorgeous," Arda gasped. The leaves on the trees were bright green, and all the trees that bordered the forest were dusted in cobalt blue and turquoise. The dust shimmered in the sunlight and reflected off the pink swirls that hung from some branches. They walked closer, and Balak stopped. He held out his arm to stop Arda.
"By the Maker," he whispered.
He pointed his finger in the direction of the forest.
"Look, over there."
Arda could make out 2 brown eyes with sapphire pupils. She refocused her eyes and saw the shape of a sturdy creature with 4 legs. It was broad at the front and so vibrant. Its head was round, and it started to unfold its ears like the petals of a blooming flower. As they drew closer, they noticed another two creatures, then two more, then a whole pack. The creature unfolded several smaller petal shapes in oranges, blues, and greens. Two sharp black horns were uncovered just above its long nose. "Are those its ears?" Arda asked.
"I wouldn't know,"
Balak answered. "It looks like some kind of bison, but its head, it's—"
"I know. Weird."
"I was going to say beautiful," she said. The animals moved quietly and slowly, but soon started to pick up their pace. A black and gray figure slinked through the grass before them, making a run toward the pack. A cat-like creature pounced from the long grass and took out the creature at the back of the pack. The bison-like creature bucked and wailed as it was clawed and torn apart by long, sharp teeth. And the rest of the pack ran until it could be seen no more. Arda looked away, and they pushed on, creeping through the trees, in awe of the forest's beauty. The blue and pink dust was not dry, but was fresh like morning dew. Orange and lilac buds bloomed, forming an archway entrance to the forest. As they passed underneath, they could smell the gentle aroma of sweet honey. Arda reached out and touched a bud with her delicate finger, which slipped right off its cold, smooth shape. Balak and Arda pushed deeper into the forest. They could no longer see the outside world. They could hear the twittering of birds and the chattering of animals all around them. The shrubs and bushes grew taller along their path as they headed farther into the thicket. They passed leaves that were almost as big as Arda. The path narrowed, and Balak pulled up his tunic to prevent the overwhelming scent of the overgrown yellow orchids from catching in his throat. Their fragrance was sickly sweet with a hint of spice. Arda started to slow as the child grew heavy. They had been walking for several hours, but the beauty of the forest ignited their curiosity. "We should stop and make camp," she told Balak.
"I'm looking for a safe place. We have no idea what lurks here."
They heard running water as the path started to open up, and there was a small patch of grass by a pool with a small waterfall. The water from the fall frothed white as it splashed into the bright blue pool. The grass was green, but the closer they got to the water, the bluer it became.
"We'll set up camp by those trees,"
Balak instructed. He walked over and started to make a shelter with a blanket and some low-hanging tree branches. He then threw over some of the huge green leaves.
"We should stay well hidden," he told Arda.
She rolled out the fur blankets inside the shelter and set the baby down in her basket. Balak was just outside, building a fire. "I'll fetch some water for supper," she told him. He nodded. Arda bent down and scooped up some water in her cooking pot. It looked spotless and fresh. She was startled by two black eyes watching her from the opposite side of the pool. A creature stepped into the light and walked closer to the pool. It was a gray and white wolf-type creature. It was as big as a horse, with rainbow-colored feathers forming its wings. It sat cautiously and ruffled its white chest before leaning in for a sip. It lapped at the water, its round pupils fixated on Arda. She paused and watched as it pulled itself to its feet. It spread its colorful wings and shook them twice. It then folded them in and loped away with its head held high. Arda took the water to the fire. "I've just seen a wolf with wings."
"Wolf? We need to take shifts on watch."
"I don't think it was a threat."
Wolves only bring trouble, or did you forget what happened before?
This one was different. Just think, we could be the first people to see these creatures since the heroic age.
People who come here are said to never return. Let's make sure we are not like them.
Look, there it is again. It flew overhead. It didn't even acknowledge the pair below.
That gives me an idea. I'll climb up that tree and see if I can work out what direction we need to walk in,
Balak said. When he got to the top, he looked across the forest, but all he could see were treetops. He sighed. Arda put her pot on the fire Balak had built. She started to cook. Do you know where we're going?
Not really. I could not see the forest edge. I see why people got lost here, he sighed. We should continue west.
Arda changed the child and checked her satchel for food, but supplies were low, and all she had was some corn, bread, and plenty of milk for the child. The child twisted and moaned restlessly. We need supplies soon, she told Balak. This won't keep us for more than a couple of days. She sat and looked at her idyllic surroundings. She noticed a tangerine on the ground by her hand. Look, she said to Balak as she began to peel it. Maybe this is edible. But as she peeled off the last of the skin, it unraveled and grew legs. It rolled from its back and onto its front and then scurried away. She sighed. I guess it's not a tangerine after all. Balak watched the creature run.
I guess not, he said.
You have been quieter than usual. Balak sat silently. Do you plan to speak to me? She asked.
Why don't you start by telling the truth?
Where would you like me to start?
Who else knows about the child?
I don't know.
Well, somebody does and wants the baby dead.
Levon had children. If they knew someone else could contend for the throne, they would want them to be gone.
What about your parents?
Arda took a deep breath before she found the words to answer the question. I lied about that, too. I never knew my parents. I spent most of my life in the palace halls. The only friends I had were the servants and guards.
Then what do you seek to find in the iron gates?
Not what, but who? The king's younger brother, Lord Anzor.
So you hope he will offer protection?
That's my hope.
And what if he doesn't?
Arda fell silent.
I thought you were smarter than this, he said. What if you're heading right into a trap, except you will be taking all of us with you? I've dealt with men like Levon. Putting your fate in the hands of Lord Anzor is a mistake, if he is anything like his brother.
He is nothing like his brother. Levon was a predator. You don't get to tell me what kind of man he was. I have seen his true face. She was interrupted by a roar that echoed through the forest and rattled the trees. They would hear the flapping of wings as birds took off overhead. What was that? She whispered.
That was a warning. We aren't welcome here.
The next day, Balak and Arda made an early start on their journey. They walked for some time through a dense part of the forest. They passed by a small pool and waterfall and were soon walking along a narrow path. Look, Arda explained in excitement, a camp. There must be people nearby.
This looks oddly familiar,
Balak growled as they pushed through the tall shrubs and bushes. They soon arrived back at their previous campsite.
Shit! We've been walking in circles.
Balak, I think you should consider that we might need a different approach.
Magic?
Well, yeah. You should at least consider it.
Never,
Balak told her. But after they circled back into their old camp for the third time, he became frustrated. How do you suppose we find our way through this forest? Arda asked. Balak paused for a moment.
Fine,
he snarled. Arda screwed the spearhead back onto her staff, covering the crystal.
So, you had it hid in plain sight. Clever.
Arda nodded. Thanks. Zia thought so, too.
He knew about you?
Mages can sense the presence of another mage. It's like we gravitate toward each other. I felt there was something different about him and Kamala.
What's so special about his camel?
That was his sister.
Right. So, how does this thing work?
How does what work?
Magic.
Well, to be honest, even I don't know how to explain it.
Try me.
You speak the spell, make a few moves, and things happen.
So, I recite a spell and lightly wave my arms in the air?
I gave you a simplified version. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Go on.
Well, learning magic is like learning a whole new language. You have to pronounce the words with extreme accuracy. It's like you're trying to summon forces outside the visible spectrum, outside of our world. The books refer to it as the Irkala. One wrong word or move, and instead of summoning a fireball, your entire body could explode.
Are all spells that powerful? Perhaps that power is better left alone.
Not all spells are used for battles. Some spells are used for healing. It does take a lot of self-control in the field, but with enough practice and work, anyone can be a mage, even you.
If magic is so good, maybe you should have put the child to sleep at least once. It could have saved us on a few occasions.
Surprisingly, magic does not affect her.
How so?
I think it has something to do with her being of blue blood, a royal.
She can't be cursed?
No, sadly, she can't be healed either.
And what's the crystal for? Does it make you stronger?
Balak asked. Not exactly. It gives me more room for error. It's pretty useless to the more experienced mages, but it's essential to someone like me. She handed the crystal to Balak to get a better look.
Looks like any other rock to me. How can you tell the difference?
Same way a blacksmith can tell the difference between iron and zinc. They look the same to the naked eye. You just need to know where to look to see the difference. I sense it, too, like an attraction. I'm drawn to it as much as it is drawn to me. I can also sense other magical items around me and other mages.
Who taught you all of this?
Nobody. I did it all by myself.
That requires an explanation.
The library, back in Elbrus, had a few dozen books written about magic. I used to sneak my way to the library and read about it. A few women taught me to read stories for the children of noblemen. Eventually, I wanted to read more books about history and the world. One thing led to another, and I wanted to read more about magic.
Books about magic wouldn't have just been lying in the library,
Balak said with obvious skepticism. They weren't. I had to read them in secret. They were hidden behind locked doors and long hallways deep below the surface.
Those books are better off keeping their secrets. I would have burned every one of them if I could.
Those books possess knowledge left to us by our ancestors. Burning them would be a sacrilege. Their hard work would have gone to waste.
Some things are hidden for a reason, Arda.
I'm sorry, Balak, but you don't exactly strike me as an expert on the subject, unless you wish to tell me something. Balak remained silent. An animal's howl broke the pause.
We should hurry up. The sooner we leave this place, the safer we are,
Balak said. The crystal began to glow like a beacon. This way, Arda said. Balak narrowed his eyes, shrugged, and walked ahead. They set off again. They head down a path, and the forest thickened. Balak noticed a pool of red.
"This blood is fresh," he told Arda.
They followed the path farther, but red streaks on the ground led to an animal carcass. Balak bent down. Its entrails were strewn over a tree branch, and much meat was left behind. "What is it?" Arda gasped.
"It's some kind of deer by the looks of it, but I can't be sure. It's what killed it I'm worried about. It must have large teeth to do this kind of damage."
They heard a loud noise in the distance, and suddenly the trees started to shake.
"We should go now, before it finds us."
They pressed on, but as the darkness started to fall upon them, they set up camp with just a small, low shelter beneath some shrubs, and it was only suitable for sleeping. Outside, he built a fire. Arda set the child down to sleep and joined Balak by the fire. "This is the last piece of bread we have," she said as she passed it to him. Balak didn't reply, but broke the piece in half and shared it with her. "What are we going to eat tomorrow?" she asked.
"We're going to die of thirst a lot sooner than hunger," he replied. "I'm afraid our flasks are mostly empty. You wouldn't know any spells that could help us."
"I wouldn't even know how to conjure something like that."
"And what about the milk?"
"No, absolutely not. That's for the child. That's all she will eat. We can't take that away from her."
"I understand, but what good are we to her dead?"
Balak sat at the campfire, but he was deep in thought. Arda asked him, "I can sense there's more to it. Is there something else on your mind?"
"There is. The dead deer we saw earlier. Whatever killed it left much of the meat untouched."
"I don't think I'm getting it."
"Most predators kill to feed. The only time they don't eat the meat is if they're protecting their turf and offspring, or..."
"Or what?"
"Or if they're hunting for the thrill. I've never seen an animal killed just because it wants to. That's what worries me."
Balak noticed two vertical beaded yellow pupils tracking them from the brush.
"Arda, we're not alone,"
Balak whispered as he swung his axe above his head. A horned creature appeared. It had two long, sharp teeth that pushed over its huge jaw. It was long and cat-like and almost as tall as Arda. It was snarling as it moved toward them, crouching low on its front paws.
"Get ready,"
Balak said. Arda readied her spear. The creature pounced. Its huge paw knocked Balak into a tree. Arda thrust forward with her staff, but the creature jumped back, then pounced again. Balak swung his axe and chopped at its side, just as Arda ran in with the tip of her spear. Blood exploded everywhere and splattered all over Balak's upper body and Arda's shawl. The creature wailed its last breath. "Glad this is over."
"Do you think..."
Balak began. Arda frowned as the sudden rush of a rotten smell entered her nose. "Do you smell that? Are there more?" Arda got her spear ready again.
"Yes, we are being watched."
Balak drew his axe. The flickering fire provided just enough light for them to see a shadowy figure coming toward them. It looked like a man with a large hat.
"Who are you? Reveal yourself,"
Balak snarled, but the figure kept on coming. Arda put her hand on Balak's arm to keep him from swinging his axe. The figure moved into view, but it wasn't clear. "I don't think that's a hat. I think it's its head," Arda told Balak. The strange creature stood atop two legs. Its body was long, but its head was shaped like a mushroom top.
"This thing must have killed the deer,"
Balak claimed as he wriggled his arm free from Arda's grasp. "Balak," Arda said as she gripped his arm again, "I suggest you take another look at it." The figure took a step toward her. It had 2 large brown eyes, and the whole of its head and body was a very light shade of brown. It wore no clothes, but clutched a spear with its long, thin hand. Its eyes and even its arms and legs resembled those of a human, but they were thin like tree branches. Its head and body were shaped differently than that of Balak and Arda. Even in its naked form there were no distinguishable features other than some gills tucked up inside the hat shape on its head. There were no sexual organs, and it did not have a nose. "Look, more of them," Arda said. They started to push out of the shrubbery and circle Balak and Arda. A couple of them had shields. Another was wearing a breastplate.
"Stay back,"
Balak snarled. He jabbed his axe toward them, but a creature with a shield stepped closer. "Balak, put down your weapon. I don't think these creatures are threatening," Arda ordered. Balak lowered his weapon, and Arda crouched down. "I'm Arda. Don't worry, we won't hurt you," she told it, and held out her hand. More creatures appeared, and the one by Arda grabbed her hand and began pulling her. "Wait," Arda said. "Balak, they want us to go with them."
"Arda, I don't think—"
"Balak, we have to go. You have to trust me." Arda strapped the child to her and held out her hand. The creature guided her along the path, and some of the others guided Balak by pointing him in the right direction. They headed under a giant tree, and the ground began to soften beneath them. It was cool and damp.
"This is fresh soil,"
Balak noted. To their left they saw smaller spawns of the mushroom-shaped heads peeping from under the ground. All of them looked similar in shape, but their tops were very different. Some were larger than others, and they had different colors and shapes. Some of the creatures were thick and short, while others were tall and thin. Balak noticed that one of the creatures had a brown patch on its hat. Another had 3 spots. They were led to sit by a hole in the ground. One of the creatures lowered Arda's feet into the hole and then indicated that Balak should do the same. Then they covered their feet with earth and chucked water on their heads.
"Hey!"
Balak yelled. Arda laughed. "No, we can't eat this way. We eat using our mouths." She opened her mouth and pointed inside it. The creatures narrowed their eyes. One of the creatures put its feet in the hole and covered them, while another poured water on it. "This must be how they eat," she told Balak. "They must absorb their food."
"Well, at least they can't absorb us then. Do they have any real food?"
Balak asked Arda. "I'm not sure. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, these creatures are called gobelisks, the forest men. I don't think there is any way to communicate with them through words." A smell of sweet, damp grass filled the air as the creature pulled its legs from the soil. Several creatures approached and led them to a small cave. They pulled at Balak and Arda, encouraging them to enter. One of the creatures carried a torch and pointed to the pictures. There were various inscriptions, symbols, and images on the cave wall. Pictures of a dragon blocking the sun, a figure covered in flames, and a bleeding tree stood out the most. Balak leaned toward Arda and asked,
"Does any of it look familiar to you?"
"Not really. This might be their history. Look, Balak," Arda said. Her mouth was agape as she saw the story of a horned creature terrorizing the gobelisks. "They knew we were coming. These images are not of the past. These are prophecies."
"Don't tell me you believe in this nonsense,"
Balak croaked. "Then how do you explain this?" At the end of the row were 2 human-like figures, one holding a spear and the other an axe, as they stood over the huge dead beast. Balak couldn't help but admit that the whole thing was strange.
Do you think they drew it?
Balak asked.
Your guess is as good as mine. I wonder what the rest of them mean.
I don't think it's for us to know.
They turned to walk out of the cave. The whole tribe had gathered and was staring at them. She laughed.
They think we're heroes.
We killed their beast. Enough heroics for one day.
The Gobelisk held out its hand, and Arda placed hers in it. It closed its eyes for a moment. It then scurried off and returned with some berries for Arda and Balak.
I think those are edible,
she said to Balak. Balak took one, examined it, and ate it cautiously.
They taste the same as the other edible berries, so they should be safe.
Thank you,
Arda said, accepting the berries. She ate a few, and Balak also ate some. She wrapped some in a cloth for the child who was still snoring. Balak and Arda settled by a large tree, and Arda soon fell asleep. Balak watched the little creatures as they walked back and forth in small groups, dipping their feet into the hole, covering them, and then disappearing with their weapons so others could take their turn. Some had swords, others had spears. Balak managed to get some sleep, but woke Arda at first light.
We need to get started on our journey again. This place makes me feel uneasy.
Balak started to dress in silence.
Balak, is everything all right?
Something just doesn't sit right with me about that image in the cave. I'm going to go take another look.
Great. I'll go collect food for our journey,
Arda said. He headed back inside and followed the pictures. He looked at the image of the creature. It appeared twice as tall as Balak.
Shit!
Balak exclaimed and rushed out of the cave to find Arda.
Arda, give me your shawl.
What?
Balak grabbed it from Arda and threw it in the fire she had built.
What has gotten into you?
Arda protested.
Remember the image in the cave? That creature looked twice as big as me, and the one we killed barely matched your size.
Then it must have been exaggerated.
Arda was growing agitated.
What if the images in the cave are right? The dead deer, it was a warning. The beast was defending its turf and offspring. We didn't kill the beast, we killed its child,
Balak said. There was a painful howl close by, and Arda looked up.
You are right,
she told him. Her eyes widened and her skin turned pale. Even Balak felt shivers all over his body. He tossed his tunic in the cold fire, leaving him naked from the waist up. Arda quickly grabbed a spare shawl from her satchel, then strapped the child to her chest and grabbed her bag.
We have to warn them.
Balak growled at the Gobelisks, mimicking the beast, but they simply looked at him with blank stares.
They are afraid of you,
Arda said.
They can't understand you.
This is pointless, Arda. We have no time for this,
Balak stated.
I have an idea.
Arda grabbed her spear, closed her eyes, and started to utter some strange words. Balak looked around uncomfortably.
You'd better take a deep breath,
she warned him. A strange mist shot from her staff and filled the air. It smelled stale and mossy. The Gobelisks stopped in their tracks and started to run around, gathering their young and their weapons. They waved to Balak and Arda, who followed them, and all began running. The roars got closer, but the Gobelisks led Balak and Arda up a tree and onto a hidden platform. The massive horned creature entered the village below. They could not see the beast, but they could feel its weight by the shake of the earth and its loud roar. The beast dug up their soil and thrashed around in their village before turning and heading away, deeper into the forest. The Gobelisks led Balak and Arda back down, and all looked around their village. One held Arda's hand.
If they hadn't tried to hide us, they might never have been found,
Balak said.
Or maybe they would have and wouldn't have had the warning, Arda replied.
For some time, Balak and Arda followed the creatures through a part of the forest they had never seen before. The trees were dark brown and gray, and they were twisted. Some even looked like they had faces.
"We need to get back on our own path and work out where we are,"
Balak said to Arda, but the creature with the large brown spot on its hat kept waving for them to follow. Arda looked around cautiously. She could see a pale dusting of blue and pink swirls glistening in the sun in front of them.
Balak, I think... Look!
Balak looked at the blue mist and pink swirls at the forest's edge. The gobelisks stopped and pointed the way. Arda crouched down.
"Thank you,"
she said, and gently bowed her head. They all bowed their heads to Balak and Arda before disappearing out of sight. Arda burst into a small chuckle. Balak looked at her, confused.
"What's so funny?"
he asked.
"This is the second time we were saved by mushrooms."
"Yeah, I guess this is kind of funny. So, you still believe in prophecies?"
Balak asked. Arda stood in silence.
"That's fine, girl. We all make mistakes. Now, lead us out of this place."
"Us? I thought there wouldn't be us anymore."
She grinned at him. Balak had no reply.
"There's that smell again,"
Balak groaned.
"No, this one is different."
There was a sugary citrus smell, and the line of gobelisks fled back into the forest.